Yeah, doing good. Watched that interesting game against the Titans. We came out with the dub, which was good. Shout out Jesper Horsten. I'm still a doubter. Don't know why you're on the roster. I don't care if I get hate about it. I was just on our parent company, Empire Sports Media, their Fireside Giants YouTube page. If you're a Giants fan, you happen to stumble on this video, go check them out. They have vested interest in Chicago Bears this year because they have one of our first-round picks. So running down our offseason moves, what we did, what it's looking like, my prediction for what the pick might look like, in general, my pessimism, but our shared love for Justin Fields. Our friends over at Fireside Giants love Justin Fields as much as we love him. So it's always a good conversation. If there's one thing that Bears fans can unite with other fans about in the NFL, it's just how much of a great guy Justin Fields is. So definitely try that out. And happy Khalil Mack Day, by the way, to the big man up there. 3 years ago today, we decided to make a fantastic move. Probably Ryan Pace's best move outside of drafting, because he's actually a pretty good scout. That's about it. So thanks to Khalil Mack for showing out and doing good stuff for the Bears. And like I said, this is an indicator to remind us that even though we are 11 days away from week one, anything can happen trade-wise. So I'm looking at Nick Foles here. But what about you? How are you doing?
Excited to get into this 53-man roster. What's weird is there's such a divide there's 4 people right now at Fireside Bears. There's such a divide between the Jesper Horsten fan club, because our guys Sam and Joe that are on the weekly podcast with me, these guys stand Jesper Horsten so hard. And for me, the way I'm looking at this is there's been 2 times, and I pulled up the receipts, by the way, that I tweeted the Bears need to get rid of Jesper Horsten or just cut him completely. And my reasoning was very simple. One was 2 years ago in the game against the Raiders in London. Number 2 was last week against Buffalo, when I think he was the one that lost the fumble. But he lost the fumble both times. I said Jesper Horsten needs to be cut. But the reason being is simply because as a young guy, as an undrafted free agent, you are not guaranteed a roster spot, so you better take advantage of every single opportunity. And Jesper being like 6'3", 6'4", about 237, 240 pounds, right in that range. He's not as big as... Is he a pretty decent receiving tight end? Yeah. But he also doesn't really present a mismatch that a guy like a Cole Kmet or a Jimmy Graham. Well, Jimmy Graham used to present a mismatch. He's too slow now. But Jesper Horsten just is not a big red zone target. He doesn't present a mismatch either. So really, he's kind of on the smaller end of like playing tight end in the NFL. And it's not like he's got great breakaway speed either that we see from guys at the position like a Noah Fant or a Kyle Pitts or even a guy like a George Kittle. And so moving forward with Jesper here, the positive is that his 3-touchdown game comes at the right time, because if he could just continue to stack strong performances on top of each other, he could complement Cole Kmet perfectly in 2022 and beyond.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we'll jump into the 53 right now, because why not? My big issue with Jesper Horsten is the fact that he's taking up spot that could have easily been given to someone else. 5 tight ends. I will continue saying this for the entire season. There is zero reason we should have 5 tight ends in this offense that's primarily 11 personnel, unless Bill Lazor and Nagy are going to switch it up and put in 12 and install some sort of I formation and power formations, and we're running a fullback with JP Holtz or Jesper at the full. Okay, cool. But last time I checked, it's 2021. Matt Nagy is supposed to be a West Coast guy, stretch the field. Why do we need slow guys like Jesper Horsten, JP Holtz, bogging down our roster? What we talk about, we have issues. I've had issues with depth for this team the entire offseason. I've said it multiple times on this show. We have ridiculous issues of depth at the cornerback position. We have issues with depth at the wide receiver position. Okay, we bring in Rashad Perryman. It's not 100% official, but we're bringing him in. He's nothing really to be super excited about. He was essentially the Kevin White that was able to put a little bit of his career together. Had 2 good years the past 2 years. I wouldn't say good. I'd say okay. But outside of that, we don't have – if any of our core guys gets hurt this season, essentially we can write it away. That's what I'm trying to say. I don't care if I get flack for that. We do not have talented depth on this roster. So why are we not looking out at the waiver wires? Why are we not looking out at the free agency or trying to make some trades? Unless we're holding on to these tight ends for trade chips, there's zero reason we should have 5 tight ends on this roster.
Yeah, and the problem is, look, the major problem kind of seems to come in at the tight end position before we get into the rest of the roster in just a moment here. One final point I'll say about the tight ends is that it's like, do you have a guy that is just a complete all around tight end on this roster that can be one of the top in the league? Probably not. Just that's going to depend on how Cole Kmet develops. And Cole's a pretty decent receiver. He is a pretty good blocker too. I mean, he right now in the context of the Bears is the most complete tight end on the roster. I mean, Jimmy Graham at this point is just a glorified receiver option that the team is paying $9 million for no reason. And then JP Holtz is a player that has traditionally been used in the fullback role. So, which by the way, side note, JP Holtz absolutely sucks when it comes to catching passes. Of all 5 of these tight ends, he's got the highest drop rate of any of them. And then Jesper Horsten, again, a player that should theoretically be making his NFL debut this season. The only reason he made it in 2019 is because the Bears were injured at tight end between Trey Burton and Adam Shaheen and a whole bunch of other players. And then Jesse James is a guy who's fallen off the last 2 to 3 seasons. But when he was in Pittsburgh, he was a pretty solid receiving option. And so right now you're looking at a positional group that the Bears are just banking on the entire position kind of just taking off and being stable, which by the way, it's always good to be fully vested into your plan A, but when you don't necessarily have a plan B, it bites you. And considering just the way that the Bears do things, we know that their plan A probably isn't going to work out like some people are going to anticipate.
Yeah, and so I completely agree with that. I think Jesse James showed kind of flashes of returning to that form in preseason. He has a connection with Justin Fields, which is great, but Justin Fields is essentially, we'll start at the top of the list. All right, quarterback. Edit something here that says quarterback to future me. Okay, so quarterback, Andy Dalton, Justin Fields, Nick Foles. Only surprise here is Nick Foles is still on the roster. And here's my question. Justin Fields is going to be running the practice squad. He is going to be QB1 in the practice squad. Okay, cool. Does that mean he's QB3 on the roster? Does that mean if Andy Dalton goes down in a game, we're plugging in Nick Foles because he's familiar with the scheme and the offense? Or are we telling Justin Fields you have to memorize 2 books a week? Here's the defense, or here's our opponent that we're running so we can scheme our defense. And also, hey, just in case Andy gets hurt, here's our game plan this week. Are we asking our rookie to do that much? Are we asking a potential future of our franchise to start his career like that? That doesn't make any sense to me. So my answer is probably no. He's probably QB3 if Andy goes down, just Nick gets plugged in. What do you think?
Yeah, that's a really intriguing point that you raised right there because again, as much as, and look, Bears fans absolutely hate the national media, and I know I brought the national media a couple times up on this show, but Bears fans hate the national media because last season and just years and years before that, what would happen is the national media ended up being 110% right about the Bears. Well, over the last couple of weeks, if you look at since the Bears drafted Justin Fields, if you look at everything that's coming out from people at ESPN and CBS Sports, the main consensus is that Pace and Nagy don't know what the hell they're doing. They're on 1-year deals, and that for them to save their job, what needs to happen is you need to go ahead and you need to start Justin Fields. Now, Justin should be starting. I mean, he's without a doubt the most talented player on the roster outside of Khalil Mack, by the way. But the point is just the fact that Matt Nagy is, and Ryan Pace, by the way, because we're recording this on Wednesday, September 1st, and Pace had his presser about 3 hours ago, which is going to be the last time we hear from him until December or January. So just keep that in mind. But the point is that Pace and Nagy both have said this offseason, hey, we're confident in Andy Dalton as our starter. Andy Dalton kind of got Mike Glennon and was like, oh, yeah, this is my year. I don't care what anyone else thinks. And so the Bears are so vested in Andy Dalton being the starter, that it's legitimately coming at the expense of Justin Fields. And when I said last week that the Bears have made a mess of the quarterback situation, this is exactly what I was talking about. Justin has proven time and time again that has he earned reps with the ones? Yeah. Does he deserve reps with the ones? Absolutely, positively. But the thing is that he should not be, QB3 going into game day, because at some point it's like, what are you going to do? Are you going to make Justin just have a completely uphill battle and be like, okay, well, Andy, you sucked. Well, we're going to turn to Nick Foles now because we think it's best for our team. Well, when you turn to Nick Foles, it should theoretically be turning to Justin Fields because that's his opportunity, but you're not going to do that. And by the way, Matt Nagy's mentioned Kansas City and Alex Smith and Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes so many times this offseason, to the point where the reason Justin's running the scout team and his QB3, aka Tyler Bray right now, that's pretty much what Justin Fields is. It right now because he's head of the scout team. What's going to happen is Matt's just going to do this to keep him on the bench as long as possible, because Matt is just so set in stone that he can replicate the 2017 Kansas City Chiefs plan, which, by the way, last point I'm going to make is that 2017 offense took off, but they had a veteran quarterback there that was under center for about 3 to 4 years. They had tight ends like Travis Kelce and wide receiver Tyreek Hill. They had been in that offense for multiple seasons, basically, before that offense took off. But the Bears don't have that here, so it's a completely different situation.
Yeah, I'd also like to point out that Patrick Mahomes had, of course, Alex Smith, who I think is better than Andy Dalton. But he had a team his rookie year that was winning games. The Chiefs went to the playoffs with Alex Smith under center. So there was no rush to throw Patrick Mahomes back there. But Andy Reid decided to do it because he thought it was the best decision. He said, okay, I like this guy a lot. He's really good. Alex Smith is a good quarterback, but I'm going to trade him because I really trust this guy. That's got to give you such a wave of momentum entering your first year under center. You just beat a proven veteran in Alex Smith to get this job. Now, fast forward to Matt Nagy's situation, right? Justin Fields already knows he's better. The entire city already knows he's better. You cannot compare the Kansas City situation to the Chicago situation. And every time I hear Matt Nagy say it, it just absolutely infuriates me because they are not one and the same. Patrick Mahomes flew under the radar. Yes, there were a lot of people out there that thought he was going to be great, but there wasn't as much national hype as there is for Justin Fields. Every time he touches the field, ESPN has all cameras on him because he has his own shows. He's been on TV since he was in high school. He's Justin Fields. He's in a huge market team in Chicago. This is not Pat Mahomes coming out of nowhere and taking his team to the deep in the playoffs against Tom Brady. This is a guy who knows he's better than QB1, who deserves to be QB1, but we're not going to plug him in there because, well, hey, Patrick Mahomes got to sit behind Alex Smith for a year. Okay, I was talking to the Giants today, right? Dave Gettleman, GM for the Giants, said, well, we're going to give – Eli Manning still has 3 or 4 years in the tank. We're going to put Daniel Jones in when Eli Manning's out of gas. 4 games later, they put in Daniel Jones, and they took Eli Manning out of the starting role. 4 games later, they said that they were going to take a multiple-year progress. Eli Manning replaced his starting quarterback, his QB1, a couple games into the season as well. So I don't even know if I believe any of the crap that he's saying because I don't think they had a plan for Justin. They looked at 11. Ryan Pace and Dave Gettleman have a working relationship together. They said, holy cow, nobody's drafted Justin Fields yet. We should go up and get this guy. They had no plan before the draft to draft him. They had no idea that they were going to be able to draft him. So the second they got him, they've been running all this off the fly. They don't know what to do with him because he's showing them out. So right now, Matt Nagy's in I need to protect my career mode because he's going to get run out of Chicago if Justin Fields comes out there or doesn't play a game and we go, 5 and whatever it is now, 5-13. He's going to get run out of Chicago. If he stays after this, I'd be ridiculously upset. If we have a losing season with a quarterback who's on a short-term one-year deal, and guess what? We can't even trade him. Andy Dalton's going to walk away at the end of the season, and we're going to say, okay, cool. That was a failed experiment. Justin Fields, go in there. no game time experience. You ran the practice squad though, so that's cool. You were going up against our defense, I guess, which is one of the worst secondaries in the NFL. That's great. So it gets me really frustrated because I'm questioning why we're wasting the development of such a talented player over Andy Dalton and Nick Foles when we know both of those players could get us, I don't know, 5th, 6th round draft picks right now. It's ridiculous to me. But anyways, moving on, let's go to the running back position. We have David Montgomery.
Yeah,
let
me make one final point here before we get into about the quarterbacks, before we get into the running backs thing here, because you alluded to like 5-12 or 5-13. I'm fine with a 5-12 season if Justin Fields starts a majority of those games.
Sure.
But because I know that the first year of a rookie quarterback is just going to be, struggles, and you're not necessarily even trying to win. You're just trying to develop and see what you have with that quarterback, because what happens during those 17 games is going to dictate your plan for the quarterback moving forward. And that isn't just exclusive to Justin. It applies to Trevor Lawrence, Trey Lance, Zach Wilson, Mac Jones. But what I'm not fine with is throwing Andy Dalton under center for 17 games or a majority of the 17 games. So let's just say like 9 of them, and then just completely blowing the season away when you know that if you weren't going to be competitive, but the Bears aren't going to be realistic with themselves, that you're just going to keep Andy out there for the sake of keeping Andy out there. But looking at this running back room, man, I mean, there's legitimate arguments to be made that running back is probably the best position on this 53-man roster. I mean, we know what we have in David Montgomery, a bell cow running back. Damian Williams, despite being out of the game for about a year and a half at this point, he's provided some really solid depth. Khalil Herbert's a player that's averaged about 27 yards per return in the special teams game at Virginia Tech. And then you have Tariq Cohen, who, by the way, his status is such a mystery at this point. Like, Tariq Cohen, I think, is becoming the classic case of, well, you perform pretty solid your first couple of years as a running back. You got paid, and now injuries have hit, so you're falling off. Which, by the way, side note, Monday, September 26th or 27th is actually going to be the 1-year anniversary of the Tariq Cohen injury, and he's still not back, so he probably had another setback.
Yeah. I'd like to first say that, I'll give credit to where credit's due for Ryan Pace. We built a solid running back room after last year, where it was literally just David Montgomery after the Tariq Cohen injury. So great job bringing more depth. Khalil Herbert, fantastic draft pick. I liked it since day one. He showed out. He looked fantastic in preseason. I'm excited to see him. He's definitely going to be used as a gadget guy. And he'll definitely be used in the return game for sure. He's just really shifty. He has great speed. Tariq Cohen today, it was asked to Matt Nagy whether or not Tariq Cohen had a second surgery. Matt Nagy said, did he? Did he have a second surgery? And then gave weird details. So he kind of answered the question. And then today in Ryan Pace's press conference, the question was asked again, what's the status with Tariq Cohen's second surgery? And then Ryan Pace said, I don't want to talk about that. So he refused to comment, which essentially means, Tariq Cohen has had a second surgery, and no timetable was given. So honestly, at this point, I've kind of given up on seeing Tariq Cohen in any capacity, let alone a good one. As a Bears fan, that sucks. Human joystick, it was fun while it lasted. It's absolutely terrible that he got hurt the way that he did. But if he can't come back and play, I'd rather him not. I'd rather him not completely tear up his knee, take his guaranteed money right off into the sunset, go promote HBCUs like he's been doing, and I love that for him. He's a great guy. He keep Twitch streaming, keep playing Warzone. You do you, Reek. Tariq, we have depth now, which is good at this position, and we have shifty, elusive guys, which is good. So I'm not saying we don't need you. I'm just saying, if he doesn't come back, it's not the end of the world, honestly, with the depth that we were able to build with some speedy offensive players. So I'm anticipating David Montgomery to have another good season. He's going to have a little less of the workload on him because of Damian Williams. They're definitely going to use Damian in the passing game, and they're going to use Khalil a lot in the passing game. But look at Khalil Herbert to kind of take a role like David Montgomery did while Tariq Cohen was there. He's going to be used in a little bit more, not as much as a heavy cowboy, just run straight up the gut. That's more David Montgomery because he just likes hitting people. So yeah, there's a lot of depth there. I really like it. I'd give it an A. Honestly, I think this is one of the best running back rooms in the NFC North, and I'm expecting good things from the running game as long as our offensive line holds, and we'll get down that in a little bit. But what about wide receivers?
I mean, look, man, I have no idea what the hell went on at wide receiver, especially since, look, you already knew they made basically one addition to this wide receiver room and a whole bunch of subtractions. So this was a subtraction by addition type deal, not an addition by subtraction. Okay. I mean, we already knew that Allen Robinson, Darnell Mooney, Marquise Goodwin, and Damiere Byrd were going to be making the 53-man roster. Now, what I'm confused about is why was John Vea Johnson cut, especially as a player who seemed to really showcase the couple of days that I was at Hallis Hall. He was a guy that did showcase enough potential to warrant earning that spot. I understand cutting Javon Wims and Riley Ridley. Look, those guys, I get their Georgia buddies, but Javon used to hang around a certain wide receiver who got traded to an AFC South team this offseason. And that guy was, by the way, a bad influence. And so it's just like what's going on here at the wide receiver room. I mean, the only receiver under contract for next season is Darnell Mooney, and I get no one's thinking about 2022 just yet. But then again, it's just like the other argument is that you are going to have to address this wide receiver room. Not necessarily if one of those guys goes down, you still have an issue. You also need to find just a really solid number 3 option. Can Marquise Goodwin be that guy? Yeah, but it's been a couple of years since he's produced like a true wide receiver 3. And then you have Isaiah Coulter and Daz Newsome on the practice squad, as well as John Vea Johnson. I'll say this about Daz Newsome before I bounce it over to you. His collarbone injuries hurt a lot more than people think, because I do think right now the Bears would be willing to carry 5 or 6 wide receivers on the roster had it not been for Daz's injury, because Daz is a tough, gritty receiver. And then you have Simba Webster. I hope I'm saying that name correctly. I mean, he's a player that he's just in here. He's listed as a wide receiver, but he's going to be your primary return man, which is actually kind of good, because it shows that this is one of the areas where the Bears learned from their mistakes, because last year they decided to throw guys like Tariq Cohen back there, which is the dumbest stuff on the planet. And you know what? That's where you have to give Ryan Pace a major thumbs down, because he comes from the Saints organization and they just find undrafted free agents and late round guys and have them return punts, not any of their star players.
Yeah, Tariq Cohen was actually had some success in the punt returning kicking game. So when he went down with an injury, we were basically left with a giant hole on the roster. And who were going to do that? We brought in Ted Ginn Jr., who was like, 50 years old? We like bringing in really old players. Shout out Jason Peters to kind of fill in holes because we don't have any other option. This might be one of the worst wide receiver rooms I've seen the Bears put up since the John Fox days, at least since Nagy's been here. Allen Robinson, of course, he's going to show out. We hope Darnell Mooney has a breakout year. There's basically not a single guy that I've ever met, who's a fan or who's a commenter or who's a scout that dislikes what they see from Mooney. So hopefully we're seeing something good. Marquise Goodwin had an okay preseason. He's an incredibly shifty, fast guy, but like you said, he did play last year. Damiere Byrd, he's really not. You're like every down look. He's more of a guy to stretch the field. Okay, cool. Rashad Perryman, he's more of a guy to stretch the field. He has okay route running ability. His hands are garbage, so we don't want to rely on him, but he's got speed. So when I look at this wide receiver core, I just see nothing but speed and gadget guys. I don't really see good possession receivers outside of Allen Robinson and potentially Darnell Mooney, who has probably the best hands on this wide receiver core now after Allen Robinson had a good amount of drops in some really weird, awkward situations last season. I completely agree with you. I think it's wrong to put Daz Newsome on the practice squad, considering the lack of depth at the wide receiver core. I think this is why this pisses me off so much, that we have Jesper Horsten taking up a roster spot when we can put a wide receiver there who Daz Newsome, give him a couple more weeks to fully heal, get back into it. He looked good in the preseason. He genuinely did look good. I don't care about Jesper Horsten catching a one-handed pass against fourth string linebackers who weren't picked up off the waivers and are going to be working a full-time job in 2 months. I don't care. I like seeing Daz Newsome run against some third string cornerbacks and make some elusive, shifty plays. I think he's a better fit for this roster, and I think he's going to provide and build into a genuinely good wide receiver. He was highly touted in the draft. The fact he fell to 6 in the 6th round to us is a miracle. So why are we throwing him away? I don't know. We are not developing talent on this team right now, and I don't understand why. But again, I'm just a fan. I'm not a coach, right?
Yeah, you're an analyst. I mean, look, last point I'll make about this wide receiver room before we move on to the offensive line here is that you should have, number one, you should have carried 6 receivers, okay, with John Vay Johnson and Daz Newsom being on the roster. Number 2, your point about gadget guys and, lack of like possession receivers is just totally on point, because all those speedsters and gadget guy means that if those of you that are watching this, you better get ready for like jet sweeps on 3rd and 8, okay? Which, by side note, okay, when Matt Nagy is calling, 3 or 4 receiver sets on 3rd and 10s, and like 3 of those guys are running like within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage, that's just super terrible play calling. Okay, so get ready for jet sweeps with guys like Marquise Goodwin and Darnell Mooney, because Darnell's kind of openly admitted this offseason, oh yeah, I'm cool with doing whatever the team wants me to. But anyways, getting into this offensive line group here, the least experienced guy is Lactavious Simmons and Larry Borum, because none of those guys, Larry Borum was a rookie last year. Lactavious Simmons saw like absolutely 0 action. Everyone else has been in some way, shape, or form of NFL games. I mean, they've played in NFL games. Now, my problem with this offensive line isn't even on the interior, because we know what James Daniels, Sam Mustipher, and Cody Whitehair are. The issue, and your interior offensive line, for those of you guys that are wondering, by the way, is meant to help with your run game anyway. That's what the purpose of your interior offensive line is, okay? The problem, though, with this O-line comes in where Jermaine Ifedi absolutely got rocked on that first Justin Fields sack on Saturday night. He should not be on this team, okay? And then the other guy is left tackle Jason Peters. He's whatever. They're still getting him into football shape because he spent the whole offseason fishing. Elijah Wilkinson absolutely sucks. Okay, he should not be on this roster. I would actually be in favor of giving a guy like Arlington Hambright a roster spot over Elijah Wilkinson. But anyway, the point is that the interior of this offensive line is great. The issue comes in when it comes to the left tackles and the right tackle. The tackles, the 2 people that are supposed to hold up in pass protection in such a pass-happy league.
Yeah, I trust Juan Castillo. I think he's a great coach. I think what he did last year with injuries at the offensive line was great. I think we have depth like guys on the practice squad. I think you're completely right. You hit it right the head on the hammer. We have one of the best interior line group in the league. I'm going to be willing to say that. Sam Mustipher, James Daniel, and Cody Whitehair are just playing out, just straight out good. They are good at what they do. And the fact that now you have Alex Bars, who played half the season last year and held up his own to fill in the void if any of them get hurt, makes me comfortable, makes me sigh relief and go, okay, Juan Castillo did his job. We're good. We have talented players in the interior line for the offensive side of the ball. Now, I have to trust Juan Castillo when he says Jermaine Ifedi's our guy. But after watching him, I don't know if he's our guy, not just in protection schemes, but false starts. Sure, it's preseason, knocking off the rust. Okay, could be a little early to speculate. But I do not want to see him get absolutely burned by some of these defensive fronts that we're facing and some of these outside linebacker cores that we're seeing. Jason Peters, to me, is anything but a slap in the face to fans we didn't have any contingency. We found the oldest guy, probably one of the cheapest guys that we could pull off, who's fishing, and we brought him onto the team. He played a couple snaps. He looked absolutely gassed after just like 2 snaps. Now, if he has gas in the tank, he's going to dominate. Like he's good. He is a good offensive lineman. He is a good tackle. Consistently throughout his career, he's been a good tackle. So if he has any gas left in the tank, that's exciting. That's cool. We have, I think he's 39-year-old tackle out there. That's invaluable experience for guys like Sam Mustipher, guys like Larry Borum, guys like Tevin Jenkins, who Ryan Pace today said that they expect to see him back in the season. Is that being optimistic? We'll see. But that's a great voice and great experience to have in the locker room. Now, that's, again, this is the biggest concern for, we don't want Justin Fields out there because he's going to get knocked around. He's going to get hit. There's no pass protection on the outside. Okay, cool. I completely understand that. But he's running behind guys who are worse than these against Khalil Mack, against Akeem Hicks. And yes, it's not 100% game speed as running the practice squad, but he is going to be roughed up a little bit against this defense. And regardless of any team that he plays, this is the professional league. These are professional guys that hit hard, regardless of what your name is. If you're Aaron Donald or you're Kyrie's Tonga, you're going to try to knock the head off the quarterback because that's your job. So I don't know if I completely agree with that argument. I know I put that out there earlier, but I thought about it. I was like, wait a second. This is the NFL. You can't run away from your problems. So again, I throw that excuse away. But we just have to see how Jermaine Ifedi and Jason Peters play and hold out hope that Tevin Jenkins comes back. Larry Borum played well. He didn't play great, but he played well. Maybe we see him taking over a spot. This offensive line is going to shuffle a lot. Do not think that we have one solid offensive line you're going to see throughout the season, because we don't. Just keep that in mind. That's all I have to say about the O-line.
Yeah, last point I'll make here about the offensive line and Larry Borum is that, number one, Larry Borum, was the guy great? Absolutely not. Did he play better than a lot of people expected? Yeah, and you have to give him a little more leeway here just because he was thrust into a situation where complete gross neglect kind of forced him to begin playing at left tackle at a high level immediately. And then number two, man, I mean, just looking, what I find to be so interesting about the O-line is that the Bears, and I tweeted this today, by the way, and a lot of people were like, oh, well, they have 10 guys. How many more do you want them signed? The point is they have 10 quote unquote guys. Okay. And 4 of the 5 starters are returning. That's cool. Your biggest question is left tackle. Until Jason Peters legitimately gets healthier, until Tevin Jenkins comes back. I mean, there's going to be a question at left tackle all season, but I have no idea why the only guy that was signed, the only offensive lineman on the practice squad right now is Arlington Hambright. Like, that just blows my mind that the Bears didn't decide to bring in any other offensive lineman